Welcome to Malifaux University. 500. Core Rules, Strategies, and Schemes. Now that you know how to play the game, let's discuss how to win. When you set up the game, you either flipped cards or used the app to determine the strategy and scheme pool for your game. If you need a refresher on this, revisit video 302. There are two ways to play Malifaux: the core rules and gaining grounds, which is the set of tournament rules for competitive play. If you're just starting out, stick to the core rules. These are also ideal for friendly games with your friends. If you're trying to prepare for competitive play, though, get used to the core rules scenarios and then start playing with the gaining grounds rules so you're used to them by the time your tournament rolls around. The 600 series covers the gaining grounds encounters and is updated as often as those rules are. In both the core rules and gaining grounds, you'll need certain strategy markers. The details of those will be given in each strategy's videos, and you can download printable markers for every strategy from the link to Wargames Vault in the notes below. For the schemes in both systems, you'll need scheme markers. These are always 30mm bases and usually represent your crew or faction in some thematic way, even if just with the faction symbol on them. They have no height or other terrain features, but you should prepare as many as a dozen to cover all the schemes you might encounter. The most victory points, or VP, a player might possibly earn in a game is 8. You can score 4 points for the shared strategy you're both working on, and 2 points for each scheme you choose from the scheme pool for another 4 points. It is unlikely you will score all 8 points, but that's the limit. When we talk about scoring, the first rule to remember is that no victory points can be earned in the first turn. Use the first turn to maneuver your models, cross the distance, set up actions for subsequent turns. But if the rules for a scheme or strategy say a certain action must take place in that turn to score the point, don't do that in turn 1. Victory points for the strategy both players are working on are scored in the end phase of each turn. After all end phase effects are resolved, like burning damage and certain conditions ending, the player with initiative scores the strategy first if she has met the qualifications for the point. The specific ways to score each strategy and scheme in the core rules are the subjects of the rest of the videos in the 500 series. If the player with initiative cannot score the strategy, then the other player scores it if possible. There will definitely be games where either of you scores the strategy only once or twice, and that's normal. Since the strategy is scored in the end phase of the turn, and no points can be earned in turn 1, you can earn points for the strategy only in turns 2, 3, 4, and 5, for a maximum of 4 points per player. Once each player has scored the strategy, it's time to score the schemes. Each scheme has 2 points available tied to requirements known as the reveal requirement and the end requirement. Most of the time, these are also scored in the end phase, but some schemes are scored immediately in the turn when their requirements are met. It is very common for a player to forget this, meet the requirement for one of these immediate points, and realize it in the end phase when scoring normally happens. There is no very good reason to deny your opponent this point, even though the timing is off, so be a good sport and let him have the point. Play friendly games, right? The player with initiative again gets to score her schemes first, in any order she wishes, scoring one, both, or neither. Sometimes scoring a scheme involves removing markers, which means those markers cannot be used for other points, so the order of scoring may matter a great deal. Once that player with initiative scores her schemes, her opponent then scores his schemes in any order he wishes. The player with initiative does not get to dictate the order in which her opponent scores his schemes. If there is ever a scheme or strategy that is somehow scored by both players simultaneously, then it is the player with initiative who decides which player scores first. Your opponent may suspect which schemes you are striving to achieve, but it's only a guess until you score a reveal point and announce which scheme you are scoring. Some are more obvious than others, so if you're very good at the game, you might be able to trick your opponent into thinking you're working towards one scheme while actually working towards another. Some reveal requirements and end requirements are similar or even identical, while others are specifically different. Refer back to your scheme's requirements often throughout the game to make sure you are on course to earn the points. It is possible to score the reveal point and not score the end point, especially once your opponent interferes with your game and actively tries to keep you from scoring that point. However, you are also allowed to score the end point without ever scoring the reveal point. Either way, you are not allowed to score both the reveal and the end point for a single scheme in the same turn. If you wait till the last turn of the game to score a scheme, you'll need to pick one of the two requirements and score just that one. The end point is usually scored at the end of turn 5, but if your game is limited by time, or you both decide in advance to play a shorter game, then the final turn you play counts as the end of the game for scoring schemes. In these situations, you definitely want to score your points as early as possible to prevent being forced to choose just one of the 2 points. One universal rule for all games is that nothing can affect a strategy marker other than how the strategy description says. If your model can remove a marker for some effect, like gluttony here, you cannot target a strategy marker to use that effect. Scheme markers are fair game, of course, but not strategy markers. Another universal rule for strategies and schemes is that models with the Insignificant ability do not count for any strategy or scheme in any way. If the point is to be earned by placing a model in a certain location, killing a model near a marker, or interacting with a marker, no model with the Insignificant ability can score you this point.
The rules about summoned models changed with the November 2022 Errata, so be patient with players who recall them the old way. As they stand now, summoned models are ignored for friendly schemes and strategies and cannot take the interact action in the turn they are summoned, but can never use the interact action to affect strategy markers at any point in the encounter.
By friendly schemes and strategies, that means you cannot use them to score victory points, but your opponent could, so be careful with your summoning. To recap general rules for the core strategies and schemes, maximum points possible is 8, 4 for the strategy, 2 for each scheme. No points can be scored in turn 1. VP from the strategy are scored first by the player with initiative, then by the opponent. Schemes are scored the same way after the strategy, but in any order the scoring player chooses. The reveal and end points for schemes can be scored even if the other point is not, but both points for a scheme cannot be earned in the same turn, even if it's the last turn of the game. Strategy markers can be affected only by what the strategy says. Models with the Insignificant ability don't count for any scheme or strategy in any way.
Summoned models don't count for friendly schemes and strategies for the turn they are summoned and can never interact with strategy markers.
That's the summary of core rules, strategies, and schemes. Pick up a printable set of all the markers and tokens you need to play Malifaux in the Wargames Vault. If you haven't already, join our Patreon for early, ad-free access to all new content, and be sure to visit the Malifaux University gift shop for the latest in Malifaux-themed shirts, hoodies, drinkware, and more. Links are in the notes below. And remember, play friendly games, keep it simple, and have fun.